Good evening, all of you fancy people.
Yes, it's quite a fancy night when you're listening to The Abyss.
Fancy is a lucrative term. But we're back, and we've got some more spooky stories from the internet. But before we jump into it, Cleet and I thought it would be a good idea to kick it off to all of you listeners to determine our next series. So we're going to be doing a poll that's going to be on Spotify, and we're going to have 4 choices. And Cleet, what are those choices?
A horror movie iceberg, celebrity conspiracy iceberg, creepy pasta iceberg, and most haunted location per state, but a deep dive.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, you know, when you think of a horror movie iceberg, that kind of one gives me dreads because there's a lot of messed up movies out there. Not to mention I hear like the bottom ones are supposed to be like snuff films, which, yeah, I'm not really going to be into. The celebrity one's going to be interesting because there's so many like celebrity conspiracy theories, you know? And I don't know about the creepypasta one, but, you know, I'm a fan of those. And people like haunted locations too. So vote for which one you would rather listen to.
Right. And we're going to run it for a week. Whichever one wins, we'll cover. We'll probably do all of them at some point, maybe. I don't know. But you let us know which one you want to hear the most of. And again, it's going to be on Spotify. We'll link the description in all of our videos so you can go to it to do the official poll. But you can also write in and we'll tally the votes, and then we'll let you know next week what we'll be going with.
And what beer are we drinking tonight?
Good question. On my side, I have got a party pie hole. Is what it's called.
You've always seen like a party pie hole, bro.
It's a cool looking can. I didn't buy this one. This one was purchased by my aunt in Arizona and sent to me for the show. It's a hazelnut vanilla porter.
Oh, fancy. And I'll be drinking an Old English 800, 40 ounces done right.
Damn. So it was you that was telling me that when you get those, you have to drink it in one sitting. You can't do half, cap it, and come back to it the next day. You got to do it all at once.
Yes, real men and women drink this in one sitting.
So you're going to have a good night, sir.
Yeah, 7.5%. Let's go.
Oh, yeah. Mine's sitting at 5.5, so you got 2% above me. But speaking of conspiracy theories, have you seen that whole like rubber food theory going around, like with the watermelons?
Oh yeah, I've seen that. Like
dude,
rubber, just fruit being sold, something like that.
Yeah, like it's weird. Like I was watching a video on it today where like someone compiled a bunch of it, and it's like rubbery watermelon. Some of it looks like meat, and it's leathery. It's disgusting. So
yeah,
there's a big conspiracy about our food.
In China, they've been counterfeiting rice. Like
what?
I'm not being funny here, but like literally like plastic rice that kills people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, cool. So yeah, we got a lot of conspiracies we can cover. But on a spooky note, I'm going to go see that Long Legs movie this week. I'm super excited about it.
Daddy Long Legs?
No, just Long Legs.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay. Yeah, I've never heard of it.
It's got Nicolas Cage in it as the killer. It's
actually
supposedly like one of the spookiest fucking things.
I like Nicolas Cage. I really like him.
Yeah, he's funny. He's super underrated for sure.
All right, let's go to scary stories from the internet. This one is called The Woods at Night. Back in high school, my house had a vast backyard that connected to a sprawling dense forest. When we were kids, my friends and I would play deep in those woods. The slight sense of danger always made it more thrilling. As we grew up, we stopped going there, seeing no point. But one night, my buddy Tyler suggested we camp out there. Our simple idea of a walk soon turned into a full-on camping adventure. Tyler's parents had a tent we could borrow, so we picked it up and packed our bags with snacks, water, and a portable charger. Neither of us had ever been camping before, so we had no clue what we were doing. We thought it would be a fun one-night experience. We set foot in the woods, quickly realizing that Tyler's flashlight was nearly useless, barely lighting up more than a few feet ahead. It was enough to keep us from walking into trees and bushes, but we couldn't see much else. For the first 15 minutes, we chatted excitedly, but as we walked another 15 minutes, An eerie silence settled in. I occasionally heard something moving nearby, but the flashlight never revealed anything. After 30 minutes, we found an open section of grass surrounded by trees to set up camp. Tyler wedged the flashlight on top of a bush to light up the area, and we started setting up the tent. He said it was an easy-to-assemble tent, but it took us an hour to get it right. Every time we heard a noise, we grabbed the flashlight to look around, adding to our frustration. At this point, I regretted coming out there, but once we got the tent set up and settled inside, the stress eased a bit. We listened to the sounds of the woods, which alternated between silence and bursts of animal noises. It was almost peaceful until we heard human footsteps. The footsteps circled the tent, not coming closer, but not fading away either. They were unmistakably human. After a minute, they stopped, but we stayed frozen. Listen intently. 10 minutes later, we left the tent feeling too vulnerable inside. As we sat outside, talking quietly, the footsteps returned, this time getting closer. Tyler shined the flashlight towards the sound, but the footsteps continued, stopping just outside the beam of our light. We could hear breathing. Barely, but it was there. Both of us were paralyzed with fear, staring into the darkness. Then, the footsteps retreated and the woods fell silent again. We dismantled the tent as fast as we could and fled, not even following the right path home. We ended up on a neighboring street, finally making it back to my house. We stayed up all night talking about what happened and what could have happened. We never set foot in those woods again. Even today, I avoid isolated places. Whoever was out there that night, lurking in the darkness, had to be up to something sinister, and we were too close to finding out. What do you think, Britton? Would that have spooked you?
No, not at all. I don't spook easy.
You would have ran out in the darkness? I'm gonna get you.
It's like, hey, do you want a beer? All right, this story is called The Forest Stalkers. Is this like a sequel?
No.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. I'm 28, and I live in Illinois. If you've ever been here, you know this state is flat, doesn't offer much in terms of hiking or camping with scenic views. This year, I decided to try camping for the first time in a secluded forest. I thought it would be the perfect starter camping trip since the land was flat and the trail was mostly straight. At the end, there was supposed to be a small pond, so at least there would be a nice view. The hike was short, just under an hour, but the pond at the end was very underwhelming. It was tiny and surrounded by swampy mush, so I had to set up my tent further into the forest where the ground was dry. After an hour or two, boredom set in. I decided to walk around the pond to see what was there. I wandered to the other side, but there wasn't much to see. It was a peaceful forest, but with no defining landmarks. It was just trees everywhere. As I made my way back to camp, the sun was almost gone. I used a small fire starter to get a campfire going and heat up some food. But not long after sunset, I noticed a light across the pond. It was in the trees just outside the pond, right where I had walked earlier, and I knew there was nothing there just an hour ago. The thought of being here in the forest with a stranger, or possibly strangers, was unsettling, but I knew this was one of the few camping trails around, so the odds weren't too crazy. I went about my night, glancing across the pond every so often. As it got darker, the light, which I thought was a campfire, became more apparent. I realized it was a flashlight, or some sort of mechanical light. It didn't take long to find the source, a hefty flashlight lying in the grass. The batteries were drained, but it looked new, with no scratches or wear. I looked around but saw nothing else to indicate someone had been there. After some thought, I decided to leave the flashlight and head back to camp. But as I neared my fire pit, I froze. 2 figures stood there, rifling through my things. One of them stopped and turned, scanning the tree line until his gaze locked onto mine. Even from a distance, his stare was icy, filled with a silent threat. He didn't move, but his companion began walking around, circling the camp. Then the first man broke into a sprint towards the trees. Panic gripped me, and I bolted deeper into the forest. The chances of them finding me were slim, but I was too terrified to think straight. I ran for what felt like forever, finally stopping to catch my breath and get my bearings. I managed to find my way back to the car and sped home, leaving everything behind. I reported the incident to the police, but it went nowhere. The flashlight haunts me. Was it theirs, or did it belong to somebody else? Was it a trap to lure me away from camp? If so, why did they come after me? I try to convince myself it was just a robbery, but deep down, I know that I narrowly escaped something far worse.
Would you ever go camping by yourself?
No, for a couple reasons. I mean, I don't know. It sounds boring, but at the same time, the seclusion sounds kind of nice sometimes.
I think I'd be scared. That would scare me. You're just like camping out by yourself in the middle of the night. That's scary to me.
Wow. Nothing scares you, Cleet.
I'm not scared of a lot of things, but I think being alone in the woods at night, it's pretty fucking scary, man.
Yeah. I think you're scared of more than you let on.
This one is called The Phantom Camper. Last year, something terrifying happened on one of my solo camping trips. I often go camping alone, usually at familiar spots, but sometimes I like to explore new places. For this trip, I decided on a remote 4-mile camping trail I had never been on before. I drove 2 hours from my house to the trailhead and began the hike, hoping for a peaceful adventure. Right away, I wasn't enjoying the trail as much as I had hoped. Portions of it were wet and muddy, and I struggled to avoid the muck. About 45 minutes in, I noticed something off the side of the trail. A tent, worn down and tattered, with a few rips. From afar, I saw it was empty, so I walked closer. It showed no signs of intentional damage, just the wear and tear from being abandoned for a long time. The fact that it was still standing was unsettling. I looked around and inside the tent, but found nothing. No gear, no personal items, just the tent itself. Puzzled, I returned to the trail, my mind racing with questions. As I continued, I came across dozens of abandoned objects scattered along the trail. Camping gear, hiking equipment, all left behind as if someone had just vanished. The sight of it all, this deserted stuff, gave me an uneasy feeling. It wasn't accidental. Someone had left it all behind deliberately. By the time I reached the end of the trail, it was getting dark, and I set up my tent a good distance away, feeling an increasing sense of dread. That night, I stayed at my campsite, too nervous to sleep, but exhaustion took over, and I eventually drifted off. When I woke up early in the morning around 4 or 5, the sun hadn't really risen fully yet. I zipped my tent and stepped out, immediately sensing something was wrong. On the other side of my tent, a man stood just feet away. He was tall and thin, wearing filthy clothes, his face smeared with dirt and grime. He looked at me with an empty, soulless stare. I froze, too shocked and scared to move. "Leave," he said softly, his voice sending chills down my spine. I nodded, trying to gather my backpack, but he rushed towards me. I fell back, my mind racing, and all I could say was, "Okay," repeating like a mantra. He stood over me, that empty look never wavering. "Leave," he repeated. I scrambled up and ran, leaving everything behind. Glancing back, I saw him rifling through my backpack like a wild animal. I jogged, then walked quickly to my car. Thank God I kept my phone and keys in my pocket, or it could have been much worse. I drove until I got service and called 911. I learned there was an almost identical case reported, but the person who filed it chose to keep it out of the media. Likely, the abandoned tent and belongings I found belonged to them. After a week of talking to the police, they organized a small search party. They went down the trail but found no sign of the man, just my scattered belongings tossed around like trash. This case went cold, just like the previous one. The thing that haunts me is how the man didn't keep anything. He just scattered it all around the forest, as if mocking our presence. Now, every time I think of that encounter, I shiver, knowing that somewhere out there, he is still lurking, waiting for the next unsuspecting camper to cross his path.
Damn.
Does that scare you, man? He wants people out of the trees.
All right. This one's called The Night Shift Nightmare. To make some extra money, I worked for DoorDash on the weekends. I had a day job, so I could only start driving later in the night. This particular night, it was just past 9 when I began. My first order went smoothly. I dropped it off, drove back to where the restaurants were. I circled for about 10 minutes without getting a single order. Usually weekends were busy, but tonight was eerily quiet. Finally, an order came through. It was small, with a tiny tip, but I took it. After delivering, I waited in the parking lot for almost 20 minutes before the next order appeared. Another small one, but it was better than nothing, so I accepted it. I picked up the Taco Bell bag and made sure everything was there. 2 tacos and some hot sauce. The delivery fee was probably more than the food itself. I confirmed the pickup and got the directions to the house, which was 10 minutes away in a typical neighborhood. A few minutes into the drive, I stopped at a red light. The streets were deserted at this hour, so I was alone at the intersection, waiting for the light to change. A truck pulled up next to me. I glanced over unconsciously, but what I saw made me turn my head fully. The driver had his head out of the window, staring intently at my passenger seat.
Oh my God.
Where the DoorDash bag sat. He really wants those tacos.
I want that Taco Bell. Live Moss.
Oh, that just made me laugh. Not at me, at the bag. The light turned green and I hit the gas. My heart was pounding. The truck fell into my lane, maintaining a steady distance behind me. As I continued along the route, the truck stayed with me. I couldn't tell if he was following me or just headed in the same direction. When I turned into the neighborhood, I watched my mirrors anxiously, hoping that the truck would pass by. But it didn't. It turned in right behind me. Maybe he lived here, I thought, trying to calm myself, but his earlier behavior made my skin crawl. The route had me make a few turns before leading me to the last road. I turned, immediately noticing the dead-end sign a few houses down. I braked and I pulled over, my heart racing. The truck stopped behind me, headlights glaring. As I sat there, paralyzed with fear, I received a text. It was from the DoorDash customer asking when the delivery would arrive. Suddenly, it all made sense. The man in the truck was my customer, and he was waiting for me to step out. Panic set in. I had no escape plan. After a minute, the man exited his truck. He walked slowly toward my car, stopping by the trunk. In my rear-view mirror, I watched as he stared through the back windshield. My mind raced with terrifying thoughts. Then, without warning, he smashed something into the windshield, shattering it. I threw the car into drive and floored it. The man leaped onto the back, trying to crawl through the broken glass. He fell off as I made a desperate U-turn, and with the time it took for him to get up, I managed to maneuver around his truck. I saw him stumbling as I sped away, and I called 911. By the time the police arrived, all they found were shards of glass scattered on the road. I'm thankful that I escaped with only a broken windshield, but that night haunted me for months. The thought of him lurking, waiting for another victim, still chills me to the bone.
What would you do for a Baja Blast, man?
They're pretty good, like those Baja Freezes.
Yeah, that guy was gonna kill. That guy was gonna kill a man for a Baja Blast.
No, it was 2 tacos and some hot sauce. Yeah, 2 tacos and some hot sauce. That was the cheapest murder. It was like $3.
All right, this one is called Creepy Hot Chick. There was a beautiful girl in her school, captivating in every way, that drew everyone's gaze. However, a sinister rumor clung to her. Every man she dated ended up dead. Despite the whispers, no evidence ever tied her to the deaths, and the police never arrested her. Fearful of the rumors, everyone kept their distance despite her allure. One day, to my shock, she asked me out on a date. I asked her why, and she replied, "There's a place I really want to go with you." Despite my initial apprehension, I found myself drawn to her. I rationalized the rumors away, convincing myself they were baseless. We began dating, and my fear was quickly replaced with infatuation. Our days were filled with joy, and I started believing that the rumors were nothing but malicious gossip. Then one day, she asked me a question that sent a shiver down my spine. "Don't you want to go to heaven?"
Don't you want to go to heaven?
Her eyes bore into mine, deadly serious. "I want to go to heaven with you," she said.
God.
"If you give me your permission, we can live happily there forever."
Run, dude.
All you gotta do is take all these pills. I'll take them right after you, I swear. I was flustered, trying to understand her sudden declaration. She continued, I've prayed to God every day. He's told me he has prepared a home for heaven for us. Let's go to heaven together. We'll be happy there forever.
Get out.
Get out. She handed me a drink, her eyes never leaving mine. I realized what she intended, and fear took over. I bolted from the room, her desperate cries echoing behind me. We are citizens of heaven. I blocked her number and tried to forget the encounter. But a few weeks later, I got a call from the police. She had been arrested for murdering a man. The man had died after drinking a beverage she gave him, and when they found him, he was dressed in white. Oh my god, dude. She's like Black Widow, but...
Yeah, dude, that's rough.
We're not done yet. When the police arrived, she was kneeling beside the body, praying fervently. When they tried to apprehend her, she looked up with a blissful smile and said, My boyfriend just arrived in heaven. They arrested her. She screamed at them, He's not dead. He's in heaven. God told me that. He has prepared a home for him there. If you go, you'll see him. It's true. Thank you. The memories of her eyes, so filled with fervent belief, haunts me. The chilling realization that I could have been her next citizen of heaven still sends shiver down my spine. It's like, Britt, she's a 10, but she wants you to drink Kool-Aid and die after like a month of dating.
How old am I?
High school. 17.
No. No.
Well, no, the game is, what would you rate her after that?
Oh. A 2?
At least you didn't say an 11. Good for you.
11. She wants me to die and she's hot?
Not completely repulsive. I'm putting a 2 because there's that allure there, you know. Maybe she does. Maybe I will go to heaven.
Yeah, I don't believe in absolutes, man. This one's called Bloodstained Ride. I'm an Uber driver, mainly working in a large suburb outside of Las Vegas. The city can be sketchy sometimes, but this suburb is known for being a nicer area, so I never found myself worrying too much. Sure, I'd get some weird people sometimes, but they were usually just drunk, high, or otherwise intoxicated. I'd worked for a few months with no issues and found myself actually enjoying the job. On this particular night, I was working around my usual time between 6 and 10 p.m. It was one of those nights where I was getting a lot of people, making a lot of money. When 10 o'clock came around, I chose to keep grinding out these pickups and make as much as I possibly could. The very next order after 10 was from someone 18 minutes away at an undefined location. This wasn't out of the ordinary. It usually just meant that they were on the side of the road somewhere, outside of some place that wasn't on the map. I zoomed in and saw it was right next to a storage garage. That's a red flag. I began the drive, and when I was 5 minutes away, I got a call from the customer. I'm gonna be late. I need you to wait a few minutes for me. Thanks, he said quickly while breathing heavily, like he had just run a mile. He's just stuffing a bunch of body parts in his storage unit, man.
Hey, we've all been there. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I don't judge. The man hung up right after. I can't say that I'd ever had someone tell me they were going to be late, but I didn't mind waiting a few minutes. I knew if I canceled it, then we'd have to wait another 10 to 20 minutes for a new driver to get there, and I was hoping that by waiting, he'd give me a little extra tip money. Or he's going to add you to the body parts in the storage bin. When I arrived, I didn't see anybody outside, so I pulled in and I parked in the storage garage parking lot. I waited for 5 minutes, and then I saw a man in my mirror. He was walking quickly out of the storage building, holding a large duffel bag. When he got in the car, a nasty odor came from him. He was dripping in sweat. It was really gross. I'd picked up people from the gym before, so this wasn't too terrible, but it never made for a good experience. I tried not to make a face, and I greeted him. The man said nothing, so I got back onto the road. During the ride, the man held the duffel bag on his lap, staring forward without speaking a word. His silence was unnerving, and his eyes, hollow and distant, seemed to bore into the darkness ahead. The air in the car grew thick with an oppressive tension, and I found myself gripping the steering wheel tighter, every fiber of my being on high alert. After a 20-minute drive of nerve-wracking awkwardness, we finally arrived at the destination. It was a corner of a street, not an address. Before I could even shift into park, the man hurried out and started walking away, disappearing into the shadows. After all of that, I wasn't expecting any sort of tip, which was a disappointment and enough to make me call it quits for the night. During my drive home, I noticed that the smell had never left my car, even when I tried rolling the windows down. It was so bad that I had to pull over and check to see if he had left something in the back seat. I opened the door and I immediately saw red spots on the seat. I'm no expert, but it looked like blood. My heart pounded in my chest as dread washed over me. I called the police, and after some looking, they confirmed that it was blood, and there was a lot of it. We tried to track the Uber account, and the next day they even contacted the storage unit, but had no luck identifying the man. Thinking back on all of it, though, I'm certain that the guy did something terrible just minutes before I'd picked him up. He was sweating and carrying a duffel bag with blood soaked into it, and on top of all of that, he used fake accounts with both Uber and the storage unit. The more I pondered it, the more I realized just how close I had come to something truly horrific. Even in a place that's considered to be nice and safe, there are still terrible people doing terrible things. I took a week off from Uber, unable to shake the feeling of unease that had settled over me. When I finally got back to driving, I found myself way more cautious about who I was picking up, haunted by the memory of that silent, sinister passenger and the blood-stained evidence that he had left behind.
This one is called Doppelganger's Curse. One day, while wandering through a shadowy, forgotten town, I encountered someone who mirrored my reflection with uncanny precision. His resemblance was so perfect that for a moment I believed I had stumbled upon a lost long twin. Our eyes locked, both set, widening with mutual disbelief. "Who are you?" he demanded, with his voice trembling. My tongue felt heavy. Words caught in my throat as I stood, paralyzed by the eerie encounter. He, too, seemed rooted to the spot, as if confronting a ghost. Overwhelmed by a growing sense of dread, I turned and fled, my heart pounding like a drum in the silent streets. That night, a sinister dream gripped me. In it, my body was consumed by flames, disintegrating into nothing but ash and air. When I awoke, I found my skin cracking, a strange discharge seeping from my fissures. Pain gnawed at my bones. Each movement was a torment as my limbs grew stiff and unyielding. A haunted legend surfaced in my mind. The curse of the doppelganger. Meet your double, and your fate is sealed. Was I dying? Desperate for answers, I sought out a renowned fortune teller. His eyes widened in shock upon seeing me. "You are an anomaly," he whispered. "A mistake by the divine. God seeks to erase you." Panic surged through me. "I want to live," I pleaded, but the fortune teller's expression remained grim. "There is no escape," he murmured. From that day on, my body withered like a desiccated tree. My skin split open, blood seeping from the wounds. My back bent under an unseen weight. Doctors were baffled, labeling it an incurable, mysterious affliction. In despair, I cursed the heavens. Why create me, only to destroy me? Determined to defy my fate, I embarked on a grueling regimen of exercise, vitamins, and health foods. To my astonishment, my condition began to stabilize, the relentless decay slowing. Hope flickered within me, but then the nightmare returned. I dreamt of my body double. His body, a smoldering heap of ashes, burned from beyond recognition. I awoke with a scream, yet found myself feeling stronger, healthier. Gradually, my body healed, the cracked ceiling, vitality returning. Was it divine intervention or a mere coincidence? The question still haunts me. Where is my doppelganger now? Has he perished, or does he linger in the shadows, awaiting our fateful reunion? Definitely seems like a real story.
This one's called Highway of Horrors. I'm a truck driver for a moving company on the East Coast. We specialize in cross-country moving, typically relocating people to the far West Coast, which can take anywhere from 20 to 40 hours, depending on the locations. My job is strictly driving and picking up or dropping off the trailer at the houses, so I don't do any of the boxing or the loading. I'd been working with this company for almost 4 years at the time. This job started like every other. I arrived at the pickup address and I loaded up the trailer with the customer's belongings. This was a 30-hour drive in total, which I plan to do with 2 to 3 short rest stops. The hardest states to drive through are in the Midwest, specifically Iowa and Nebraska. There's absolutely nothing there, just dead roads with endless fields of grass besides them. It makes for a very boring and therefore tiring drive. As I passed through the Iowa border into Nebraska, the sun had just set, and I'd been on the road for about 20 hours. I'd already taken a short break a couple states back, but was just about ready for another. My eyes were heavy, and I could feel the drowsiness setting in. A few more miles down the road, I saw something on the side. A car was stopped off to the side of my lane with its headlights on. It was a narrow road, so I slowed down to carefully pass. As I did, I noticed that the exhaust was steaming, so the car was still running. There was a man leaning against the driver's door, looking right at me. I passed by and gave him a nod, but as I got further down the road, I saw him get back into the car. It was very strange for someone to be sitting on the side of an empty road with a running car. He didn't look like he was in any sort of trouble. He looked like he had been waiting. I checked my mirrors often, but the car's headlights disappeared behind me after a few minutes. I was more awake now, but my eyes still felt heavy. Only a mile or so down the road, I saw another car. This one was sideways in the middle of the road, and as I got closer, I saw another vehicle on the side, a large box van. I wasn't sure of the situation, but seeing that gave me a bad feeling. I eased into my brakes, but the car stayed in the middle of the road, forcing me to come to a full stop. Man, you just gotta plow through that shit. This is a trap.
Yeah, just drive right through it. I don't care if there's women and children.
And I looked in the back, and it was just a Taco Bell bag. 2
I
tacos and some hot sauce.
I saw some Baja Blast. I knew the consequences justified the means.
I was maybe 20 yards away, and I could see multiple men standing along the road, one man in front of the car. I'd have to be the dumbest person in the world not to understand what this was at this point. With no better options, I started moving the truck backwards. The men stayed where they were with a horrifying confidence. Then a light shined behind me, and a car approached, blocking my way back. A man got out of the car and sprinted toward the back of my trailer. At the same time, all the men in front started sprinting at me too. In that instant, my mind went blank, and adrenaline took over. I slammed on the gas, hearing a pop on the back of the trailer as the doors swung open. The men in front yelled and tried to stand in my way, but once they saw that I wasn't stopping, they jumped to the side of the road. I rammed right into the car, knocking it off the road and completely destroying it. Gunshots rang out in the distance, but none of them hit me. I could hear cargo falling out of the trailer for the next 5 miles before I was able to call the police and meet an officer on the road. Of course, this was a total mess, but as it all unfolded, it turned out to be much more than just a random attack and robbery. When the police arrived at the scene, the car I had slammed into was left behind, too damaged to drive. With it, they tracked down one of the members of the attackers, who gave up information on the others. They had information on the rich homeowners that I was moving and planned to stop me, steal all of the belongings with their box van, and leave no witnesses. Though they never said exactly what they would have done to me after robbing the truck, it wasn't hard to imagine the sinister possibilities. I don't think it's a stretch to assume that it would have been a lot easier for them to not leave any loose ends.
Guy just barely got out of there, man. The next one is called The Haunting of Detective Jones. As a detective in a special investigations unit, I've encountered many criminals, but none as haunting as Chase. It's been over 8 years since our paths crossed, yet his memory lingers, etched into my mind like a dark shadow. Chase was infamous for his brutal assaults, a repeat offender who seemed to revel in violence. When I first questioned him, his response sent chills down my spine. "Officer, have you ever hit someone?" he began, his voice disturbingly calm. "For me, hitting people is the most enjoyable thing. They all start off with this arrogance, but as I keep hitting them, they kneel before me. It's inevitable. No one is an exception. It's just a matter of time. Even you, officer, would kneel before me if we met on the street. Watching people bow down is more entertaining than any movie or game. He reminisced, a twisted smile playing on his lips. His gaze bore into me, cold and piercing, sending shivers down my spine. In a moment of impulsive courage, I grabbed him by the collar. His eyes darkened, exuding a chilling intensity. He leaned in, close, whispering, "You're gonna die for this." Fear gripping me, and instinctively averted my gaze, he was sentenced to 4 years in prison. But I knew this wasn't the end. 4 years later, he found me, somehow. He knew my home address and stood at my doorstep, grinning manically. "Officer, kneel before me," he demanded. Anger and terror surged within me, but I knew confronting him head-on would only escalate the situation. "You want to go back to prison?" I asked, trying to stay calm. He laughed, a sound devoid of any warmth. "I'd go back any time if it meant seeing you kneel before me," he sneered, his posture threatening. My legs weakened, but just then my neighbor James walked by, greeting me. Chase froze, his eyes narrowing. "I'll come back next time, and then I'll definitely make you kneel before me," he shouted before disappearing into the night. From that moment on, fear became a constant companion. I carried a gun at all times, dreading the day Chase would return. One evening, I saw him lurking near my house. I aimed my gun at him, my hands trembling. Startled, he retreated, asking why I was doing this. He never approached me again, but I often caught glimpses of him watching from a distance, a phantom in the shadows. I haven't heard of any news about Chase since then, but I know he's out there, a specter of my past. Occasionally, I feel his eyes on me, a reminder that the nightmare is far from over. Chase, wherever you are, I pray we never meet again. All right, that's the last one, man. We are done.
All right, so we're going to wrap up tonight. And just a quick reminder that we are going to be doing a poll for our next series. And we want you guys to tell us what you're interested in. Again, those topics are going to be the horror movie Iceberg, celebrity conspiracy theory Iceberg, creepypasta Iceberg, and the most haunted places in the United States deep dive. So we'll get that poll started on Buzzsprout. Let us know what you think, and we will start that very soon. And as always, a huge shout out to our paid supporters of the show: Modelo Time, Great Britain, Curtis and Lara, Mothman, Devin, Lara, Conklin family, and Lou. Your paid support tremendously helps us out.
If you're listening to us on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe, as it really helps us get us out there. And as always, thank you for entering the abyss.
Until next time.